children, people of all kinds, whoever you are, everyone's welcome here. It's your boy Peter here, aka Peter Freakout 10, baby. Bring you guys our episode of the Movie Review Show, where the good movies are always reviewed. Alright, back into our movie review. Alright. Now, on today's episode, today's movie shows why I mention in reviews for bad movies that a rejected script can work for its own movie. Because the movie that we're about to talk about today was supposed to be a sequel to a infamous and classic sci-fi horror film, but because of it being rejected, it was modeled into its own thing. And the story of this making of should serve as a message that you can make something with a rejected script and you can make it its own movie. And it can take on a life of its own and you can make that succeed. And sometimes go above and beyond what it was originally trying to be. And it's a fact that behind this film, some people may be surprised about, that may have already seen this film and not looked into its production like I have. And it may even make people mad at the film that the original script was for. Because let's face it, the original movie that this was made for hasn't gotten enough shit from people. But what film is that, you may be asking? That film is none other than Pitch Black. But the one question you may be asking, was the script good enough to warrant its own thing? Well, grab yourself some goggles, some weapons, and let's venture into the unknown as we talk about Pitch Black. Now, Pitch Black, this is a film made in the year 2000, and it's directed by a guy named David Twohy. Now, David Twohy is also one of the three writers of this film, and he has quite the interesting resume on both horror, action, and a bit of thriller, depending on if you look at one of his films. But he has written for films like Critters 2, The Main Course, Warlock. He also wrote for Terminal Velocity, The Fugitive, Timescape, which he also directed and was his directorial debut. Hell, he even had a hand in writing Waterworld and G.I. Jane. And in terms of directing, not only did he direct Timescape, but before this movie, he had actually directed The Arrival with Charlie Sheen. Now, I touched upon this in the opening, but a lot of people may not know this, but apparently the original idea for this script was that it was actually commissioned to be Alien 3. Of course, anyone who has knowledge of Alien 3's production knows how much of a shit show that was, and countless scripts in the midst of that were rejected. Well, David Twohy had commissioned a script to 20th Century Fox that actually bore a resemblance to this film. They ended up rejecting that, and it sat on the shelf for a while. A few years later, meanwhile, we had two writers named Ken and Jim Wheat, who had previously written A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and they were at Interscope Communications, a division that merged with PolyGram and Universal, and we're talking with the head, David Madden, about getting a film going. David had an idea for a film that he wanted them to work off, where he described it as travelers visiting a planet where multiple suns simulate daylight. But when an eclipse brings darkness, ghosts come out. The ghost element wasn't the main focus, but the original draft that they started on writing was originally titled Nightfall. And basically their idea was, you had a character named Tara Krieg, who was a female outlaw that was a part of a tribe of barbarians, who along with a few other people received a distress beacon that would basically lead them to go out and investigate this planet, only to be attacked by ghosts who are just protecting their homeworld. In the midst of writing the draft, Interscope became aware of David Twohy and his work that he contributed to the sci-fi genre and the hit that he had with The Arrival. He agreed to come on and help, contributing his own ideas to the script. They showed the first version of the draft to them, and they weren't crazy about it, and asked for David to contribute to the rewrites. And when working on the rewrites, he remembered the script that he had on his shelf that he tried to use to get Alien 3 going, and decided to take that script and rework it into its own movie, which allowed him to toy with the characters and flesh them out. In fact, he's the one responsible for changing the ghosts into creatures that we have with this version. He's also the one responsible for coming up with the Riddick character. The script was shown again to them, and they agreed to push the film forward, and also felt that he should direct the film, to which he agreed. And he was given a budget of $23 million, which is lower than that of Supernova, which is very similar in concept to that film, which that film, the main difference was that was in the $90 million range, and this is more in the range of, say, Snow Day. But it wasn't just in writing that David really put his A game to the table, but that also came in with the casting. In fact, he's the one who pushed for Vin Diesel to play Riddick. But that became a problem because the studio thought that Vin wasn't going to work as this character and were threatening to cancel the film if they didn't cast Steven Seagal as Riddick. Could you imagine that? Steven Seagal as Riddick. And this is after he had left Warner Brothers. This is not good Steven Seagal, because now we have films like The Patriot, that piece of shit. So it doesn't seem like he's got anything to his name now. This led to David having to put his foot down and fight for Vin to play this character till the studio relented. And the movie was actually shot in South Australia in an abandoned mining town, as they wanted an environment that looked unique and desolated, with some of the interior shot being shot at the Village Roadshow Studios in LA. But shooting in Australia, despite it being a practical set, it proved to be difficult for them because the weather patterns they had to keep adjusting to, as it was cold in July, and they had to keep spraying the actors with water to make it appear they were sweating because it wasn't a hot environment. There would be points it would rain, and they also had to bring the set that they built there for the outside of the ship that they actually put on display after the film was finished. And for the effects and the design of the creatures, David called upon Patrick Tatopoulos, who had just got done receiving hate mail for his work on Godzilla 1998 and seeing his work in Supernova be put to the cutting room floor to bring the creatures to life. They wanted the creatures to be unlike anything anyone had ever seen before in a movie, wanting them to not copy and paste the aliens, the raptors from Jurassic Park, or Godzilla. With Patrick's design starting with the base point of a pterodactyl, while thinking about certain fears people have of animals such as bats and cobras, as the crew wanted creatures to be more animal-like in their personality, particularly in their movement. And it would be done with a mix of puppetry and CGI, with John Cox Creature Workshop, who had previously worked on Babe and the upcoming Crocodile Dundee in LA, to handle the effects, with the CGI being handled by DNEG, who are responsible for the upcoming Mission Impossible 2, to handle the CGI. It was tough on both sides though, as it was a rush shoot and they were only given 65 days to finish the film, but they managed to get the film in the can and on time. And despite the film not being on top of everyone's radar, this film did have some buzz and marketing to it when it was coming out. And pretty much that started with David Twohy contributing to the marketing, as he helped design the film's marketing website and had aspects on that site that gave more context to the film, and even did a 20-page animated comic on that site. Sci-Fi Channel did a 1-hour special called Into Pitch Black, which leads into the events of this film. Hell, there was even a Super Bowl TV spot for this movie. So the film did have some marketing to it. I know that also played into the fact that David was worried about the film because Universal wasn't expecting it to be a hit. But it held its own. And its opening weekend, it opened to number 3 at the box office, behind The Whole Nine Yards with Matthew Perry and Bruce Willis, and Hanging Up with Meg Ryan. Faced competition from those guys. I think with the names, they kind of helped get those films on top. But it managed to gross over $11 million in its opening weekend. And by the start of the mid of March, it made over $31 million. So it surpassed its budget. We'll see more on the final result later, but it did prove Universal wrong, as they were expecting this film to fail. And honestly, when this film came out, I thought critics were going to rip it to shreds. But it seems to have mixed to positive reviews, as on Rotten Tomatoes is a 58%. Critics praised the film for Vin Diesel and his performance as Riddick, and despite being cliched, critics acknowledged the film had fun with these cliches and what they were able to do with a small budget. That did play into some critics disliking the film, who felt it was style over substance and felt the cliches hurt the film. Roger Ebert in particular awarded the film 2 out of 4 stars, as he criticized the cliches and deemed it inferior to David's previous work with The Arrival, which I feel is wrong to do, as you're comparing comparing apples and oranges. Just because it's written by the same guy doesn't mean it needs to be compared. I think it's an unfair review for Roger Ebert to base his review around just because the guy did something different and you don't like that. The audience side, though, seems to love this film. It has a 77%, and on IMDb it has a 7 out of 10. So both sides, people seem to be in agreement. Now, Pitch Black, this is a film that I was introduced to by my brother as he had been reading up on the film and its production, and I thought the idea sounded cool. I became more interested when I learned that this was actually a rejected Alien 3 script and that it was being made at its own thing. That got me intrigued. And also knowing that Harry Knowles on his site had nice things to say about it. So I was interested in not just hearing Harry Knowles, who enjoyed the film, but I was interested in how they would take a script that was meant for Alien 3 and make it its own thing. And I gotta say this, after seeing it and a few months ago doing a review of Supernova and how much of a piece of shit that was, I wish Supernova was as much fun as this movie. This is the movie that I was hoping Supernova was gonna be. I love this movie. And honestly, for as much as I like Alien 3, I like this film a bit more. Yeah, I said it. I like Alien 3 for its dark tone. I can understand my friends like Mike and Matt not liking it. But this movie is also what Alien 3 should have been. If not, then the William Gibson script. But that's another story for another time. But yeah. And it really shows what David Twohy's talents are as a director and what he can do to bring something unique but also fun to the screen. I'll get more into that later, but with the cast in this film, like I said, you got Vin Diesel from Saving Private Ryan. He was also the voice of the Iron Giant. You have Radha Mitchell, who's been in a bunch of stuff that I never heard of. Hauser from Dazed and Confused and Good Will Hunting. Rihanna Griffith, also nothing noteworthy. You also have Keith David. Yes, the Keith David from John Carpenter's The Thing. He was also the voice of Husk in Has Been Hotel and Men at Work. You also have small roles from people like Claudia Black, who's done mostly TV work like Farscape, Simon Burke from The Devil's Playground, and a bunch of other people. But getting into the film, the plot is basically we meet this criminal named Riddick, played by Vin Diesel, who, after making a prison break attempt, he's on a ship being transferred by an officer named Johns, played by Cole Hauser, to another prison. And he's on this ship with these other people who are also traveling. However, as they're flying, the transport goes through this meteor field, which destroys the ship and makes it crash land on this planet, where they discover the captain has been killed, leading to his assistant, Carolyn, played by Radha Mitchell, to take the reins and guide these people to safety. But it becomes a danger when they discover, as the planet they are on is a desolate wasteland where when darkness falls, these creatures come out as daylight is their weakness. However, where the problem really gets bigger is the fact that they discover that the planet that they are on is also about to go through an eclipse, meaning that it'll be nightfall for a long time. And realizing that Riddick has the skills necessary to get him off the planet, Johns makes a deal that if he can lead them to safety, he'll give him his freedom. So Riddick agrees as he sets out to help protect these people, as they now have to find a way to get off the planet, while the monsters start killing everyone off one by one. Will Riddick be able to lead the group to safety so they can see the sunlight again? Or will they be chowed down on by the monsters under a darkly lit dinner? I feel Pitch Black succeeds in a story sense because while on paper it may seem like it draws from creature features of a similar caliber like Alien, it has fun with the idea and does make an attempt to do its own thing. I like the idea of this ship crashing on a desolate planet And instead of Marines or soldiers, it's people traveling. So you have characters here who don't know how to fight and don't know how to defend themselves, and they aren't equipped to deal with a situation of this caliber. So they're helpless and hopeless. And the movie really goes out of its way to develop them and give them a sense of character, like with Keith David and how he's all about trying to get his kids to safety and really up on the whole religion aspect of his life, or Carolyn trying to grow a backbone and not take shit from anyone, as people are constantly pushing her around and telling her how to be a captain, a position that she feels like she was forced to take on. And in the midst of all this is Riddick. And I like at the beginning you have the character of John, who builds up this rumor that he's a monster and that he had to keep him on the change. And the movie frames him as he could be the one doing the killings before the reveal of the monsters. And every scene he's in, there's this mysterious, shadowy silence to him in his presence that really comes across as cold. And that's where the movie really starts to frame him as he could be the killer and frames it as he could be the villain. That is until the movie reveals that there is something inhuman on this planet. So not only is it a surprise that there are these monsters out there killing people, and if you're not an avid reader of Fangoria and just saw the poster and just saw this guy's face appearing through it, it really doesn't talk about the monsters. The trailer really doesn't show it, so it really is surprising to the audience that there are monsters out there killing these people. But also the fact that it may seem like Vin Diesel is the guy being built up as this villain, and then when he's asked to give them help and he really proves his heroicism, you really grow to like this guy. And another way the rug is pulled out from under you is when John really starts to basically become the villain, which you didn't see coming, as this character has such authority in this situation, and he talks about wanting the best for this particular situation. And then when you see him turn, it's surprising. And aside from that, I also think that it was the right decision for David Twohy to step away from the supernatural route and more into a monster movie territory with this film. I thought it really made it stand out. I like the idea of these creatures, how they can only come out in the dark because the sunlight hurts them, and how they burrow underground in the daytime. And I like the story beat where it's revealed that there's an eclipse in the area. So it really raises the stake and adds a sense of danger to the story. And the creatures themselves I also found really cool. I like that there's various forms of these creatures that they come across. It really makes the world feel populated and really alive, and really adds a sense of territoriality to the fact that these creatures want to kill these guys. And the fact that they vary in design, which I'll get to, you're not seeing the same thing over and over again. And I really got to give him credit for showing that these monsters are a threat, because much like Sleepy Hollow, he has kids die at the hands of these monsters, because it's not just one kid. And the fact that David had the balls to get them killed really emphasizes how much everyone is a target to these monsters. So while it may not seem like anything new, I do feel this movie has some creativity to it and to the creature genre itself, and I feel that aspect deserves to be acknowledged more than it has. Now, on a technical side, despite it being a rushed production for the crew, David's direction is great. Despite him working with a small budget, he knows how to give the film the size of a huge budget blockbuster. The film, for as small as it is, it has this scope to it that it appears bigger than it actually is. As David has a great eye for particular shots to really give the film this desolate atmosphere that really makes the planet feel endless. He really knows how to set the tone for a particular location, like these abandoned outposts, the group find, or the graveyard. I like the huge bone carcass in that area, kind of giving this trail. I like the underground burrows where the monsters are hiding, and just how darkly lit that is. And I like the shot where it's behind her and it looks like it's camouflaged itself in the darkness. And even later on, when they see like this drop down area in the facility, and they drop a flare in there, and there's all these bones down there, really emphasizing how long these monsters have been killing. And I also really liked the bleach-like color palette they gave the film. I know that was an aspect that they were hyping up in interviews, the Fangoria article especially. And normally in something like this, I wouldn't think it would work at that well. But for this film, I thought it worked really well, as it gave the film this otherworldly appearance. And he doesn't overuse the look, which I appreciate, because there's moments when they're inside and he films the movie like a normal film. So I really like that change based on the location. And I appreciate it for that, because there's some points when things like that people look at and it can become boring or make the film look cheap in some areas. But I thought it worked as a strength to this film. And when it comes to the more action-centered moments, I think those moments and how they're filmed have a lot of energy with his movement of the camera and the shots that he gets, as well as the energy of the actors involved in those moments. And even when he directs the CGI and the effects and working with the creatures, I was a bit worried when it was announced that a good portion of the creatures would be CGI, and I thought that would cheapen the creature's appearance, with only a few moments being puppetry. But the direction works there too, as he also does a great job hiding the CGI, utilizing the use of lighting, weather, especially when there's moments when they're up close to the camera and he uses the rain to kind of hide the CGI. I thought it really worked for the creatures, and they still maintained the level of threat that they were throughout the story. And it even makes for some cool moments, like when this one guy is in the dark and he has this bottle of vodka and he hears the monsters, and knowing they're around, he basically takes a sip and uses this lighter that he had to basically spit the vodka into it and creates this fire thing around. And there's like this whole crowd of these creatures around him, and it really creates this feeling to the viewer where you're like, oh god, he's fucked. And he knows how to shoot the blood and gore. He knows how to shoot it in a way where he doesn't overly rely on it and create this viciousness for the monsters when you see them ripping into people and doing all this crazy stuff with them. So there's that too. I'll get deeper into the effects and how they look later. The only thing I will say about his directing, and this could be on the editing front, is he does overuse this flashy editing a bit too much throughout the film, and I felt that could have been held back in the area. It was a bit too much to my liking. Because I was like, oh, okay. But he continuously uses it to a point that it gets annoying to watch. But even besides that, there are some cool little touches, like the eye effect. I like the effect when they show Riddick's point of view. I thought that looked really cool. And just overall, besides the editing, I have to give a lot of credit to David and the hoops he went through to get this film made and how great it turned out. He also gets a lot out of the cast here. And probably the biggest place for that scene is Vin Diesel, which I really have to give it to Vin. He is the MVP of this movie. And it makes me happy that David fought for him to be cast and that the role didn't go to fucking Steven Seagal, as Vin really gives the character of Riddick this cold, quiet, and while held back presence, you get the feeling that he could be thinking of doing something, but you also can't tell what he is feeling or what he is going to do. And just how Vin is able to contort that through his body language and just raggediness in his voice, it really gives the character this sense of presence. And when you read up just how much Vin put himself through this role, considering he had to work with contact lenses that almost got stuck in his eyes, and when he was shooting the moments in the cryo tube, he was left in there for too long and he got an anxiety attack. And just the fact that he put himself in these very action-heavy moments. I really have to give it to Vin, and just how he works off the other members of the cast, Cole Hauser especially, like just this animosity between the two and just how dickish he is towards him. But at the same time, it does make for some good back and forth between the two, like when he sees him shaving his head with the oil and John tells him that he's not supposed to have a knife, and he goes, This is a personal grooming device. That got a good laugh out of me. But I really have to give it for Vin for what he was able to do. Cole Hauser, I thought, did a great job playing a guy who masks himself as this nice guy who's a cop. So when you learn that level of authority that he has and how you feel like he comes across prepared, especially in the first half when you believe he's the good guy and feel like he has everything under control. But when the mask starts slipping and you start to see him become a coward and you see him doing drugs, you really start to hate the guy. And I think Cole really delivered on that side of the despicable character superbly and just became a character you love to hate. Radha Mitchell, I also enjoyed as Carolyn. I like her arc where her character is dealing with the fact that she's taken on the responsibility of taking over the captain's position. She's trying to take control of the situation and trying to show authority, something that the captain has done more. But in here, she doesn't have a backbone. But as the film goes along, she really starts to grow that backbone, especially at the end with the moment between her and Vin, where she lays it down and says that I'm the captain and what I say goes. And just how she one-ups him in that part was just so badass. I thought Radha delivered that perfectly. Keith David, who I love as an actor, really glad he's getting the respect he deserves now thanks to Has-Been and his voice work in Spawn. But there was a period of time when people didn't know who he was. You would see his face and you kind of be like, oh, I've seen that guy. But now, thanks to his roles, he's really getting the respect he deserves, which he needs because I like him as an actor and I think he's a bit underrated. And I think he does well here. I like the fact that it's a different character he's playing as this guy who's religious and he's trying to keep his kids at bay and under control, and he makes them do this chant as he feels it will protect them as they're on this planet. Because it's Keith David and just how charismatic the guy is in this role and how much of a nice guy he is in real life, I really dug his performance. But I also like him for the fact that he's not as judgmental of Riddick as the other people, and he does get a sense that there is some good in him as the film goes along. And the actors playing his kids do well for what they have to do. They're not in the film too much, but for what they're given, they're fine. Other actors, you got Claudia Black as one of the passengers who jumped on looking for a new home. She does fine for what she's given, nothing special. Rihanna Griffith as this girl who poses as a boy to fit in, and she takes interest in Riddick. I also think she does a good job. She's not as annoying as she could be. I do like that she's there, though, to kind of get the point that Riddick does have a soft side as he's willing to help a kid and protect her. And I think she does well there. And I think her interactions with him are really good. And the other actors do their parts well for what they're given. They're not given a whole lot to do as the cast is really small, as the film focuses on the survivors, but is mostly centered on Riddick, Johns, and Carolyn. But for what their acting is, they do a good job. Now, let's talk about what we want to talk about, the special effects. And I gotta say, the effects in this film, like I said, for a rushed production and a low budget, I gotta say, they look really damn good. The opening, you have some great model work with the ship. Definitely looks practical, doesn't look hokey or fake. But when they get down to the planet and they reveal the creatures, I like the variations of the creatures, like I said. I thought the designs were really interesting. The main one in particular, I thought looked really cool. The best way to describe them is this. You put the alien and the Kathoga from the relic in a blender and you mix them with characteristics of salt and pepper, those being animals and the raptors from Jurassic Park. That's the best way to describe them. And all of them are really interesting. The design work by Patrick Tatopoulos I thought was really good. The guy definitely knows how to design creatures. I mean, if you dislike Godzilla 98, you can't deny how much hard work went into the effects and the design. I personally think he did a great job with the design of Godzilla in that film. And I also think, despite me not liking Supernova, his effects weren't the problem. But that being said, I like the mix of characteristics from the raptors and animals, as well as the mix of the Cadoga and Alien, while also making it its own. And I like the fact that they are intelligent while also remaining animal-like. I like the fact that they aren't dumb, like they know the sunlight hurts them, so you see them burrowing underground and hiding in the dark and crawling on the walls with all fours, like Licker from Resident Evil 2, and also the iguana. And I like how they know how to attack their prey. I like the part where they pull the kid up by their tail, and they know their way around certain areas. So they're really interesting creatures in terms of design and characteristics, and the effects on them in both areas look great. I like the use of puppetry as well as CGI, and even though the CGI is used a lot more than the puppetry, the CGI is used in a way where it's relied on, but it's also not heavily relied on, as I feel David's direction is able to hide the CGI in a way where it doesn't take away from the creature as a threat, as well as the weather in the same way Roland did it with Godzilla. And I thought that was the right decision, as they still appeared in a way that looked real. And while there are some shots where you do see the close-up on the CGI when it is used, it's done in a way where it's done in quick cuts, so it doesn't take away from the illusion. And like I said, this film does get violent in some moments. Like the weird locust creatures I mentioned earlier, they chase one of the kids into this room and you see they've eaten him to death, and when they find the body, it looks like it's been eaten to the bone as he falls to the floor. Great practical looking skeleton they made for that moment. There's another scene where a guy gets ripped apart by the creatures and they fight over the corpse like dogs. And there's another where a woman gets attacked by the locusts and they rip her from her torso, which, yeah, that was CGI, but I think it was mostly used to kind of show the locust eating her. And they just, all right, we'll CGI that. But I did see some practical effects in that moment, and it did look damn good. So if you're going into violence, you're definitely going to get a good serving of it with this film. But all around, this is a solid creature feature that I feel doesn't deserve to be lumped in the bin with other Alien knockoffs, because it's nowhere near close to a knockoff and does do its own thing. It's got its flaws. I already touched upon the editing, but the ending is also another problem. It isn't much to run home about. Not that it makes it hard to rewatch, because I do see myself rewatching this in the future, but I just feel like they could have ended it a bit better than what they went with. As it just feels the film stops. Like there's no sense of resolution. You never know what happens to the character. And I think it could have went on a bit longer and kind of had some loose ends tied up than what they had. I don't know if they didn't have the time and the rush production didn't help matters, but I think there could have been something a lot better than what we got. But those two are my only problems with the film, because bottom line, Pitch Black is a badass creature feature and is the true first horror movie of 2000. Fuck Supernova. This is the real shit. And the best way to describe this film is that it appears small on the outside, but on the inside there is a massive scale of a fun monster popcorn action and horror movie that will leave you not believing they went there. So if you have not seen Pitch Black, do yourself a favor and see it. It's definitely going on my list of one of the best films of 2000 and the first great horror movie of the 2000 millennium. So, when it comes down to the final verdict, the final rating for Pitch Black is a 9 out of 10, and it deserves it. It therefore gets the Alexandra seal of approval. Definitely one to check out if you like Alien, you like monster films. you are going to get a huge ride out of this film. It's a roller coaster that is breathtaking, fun, and chilling, and just all out insanity that it is just great. So, yes, go see it. But that's my review for Pitch Black, and next time I am going to do a review of a few other films I saw, like Final Destination. I'm also working on my review of Scream 2. I just started filming that. And I am almost done with the Resident Evil 2 review. Just got to finish talking about the gameplay and giving my final verdict. I will also do a review of a few other things. I do plan to check out The Whole 9 Yards next week, so that'll get a review. I also am going to do a review of a few other things coming along the way, so be on the lookout for those. But that's what's to come soon. But for right now, I will see you guys later. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of Pitch Black. Do you guys like the film? Do you guys hate it? I'd love to know you guys' thoughts down below. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.